Hey, this is Kirk, the bariatric carnivore. Well, the Washington Post put out another one of their editorials attacking RFK Jr. basically for telling people, the citizens, the people that pay for all this stuff, to do your own research. Now, that discussion came up around vaccines, and of course the Washington Post said, well, no. You guys don't know your butts from a hole in the ground. You're too stupid to be able to do your own research. You need to trust the experts, people who have degrees in immunology, etc., because they're pure as the wind-driven snow, and if you can't trust them, listen to us, because we do not take 60% or so of our revenue coming from Big Pharma. It's infuriating, the absolute arrogance of big media companies like the Washington Post telling you that you are somehow too stupid to do your own research, because frankly it's not that difficult in this day and age to be able to figure out and be able to get basic healthcare information on virtually any type of product. Now, that is not to say that you can just listen to one particular source and that's going to take care of everything. I mean, there's a bunch of conspiracy nuts, but a lot of conspiracy nuts happen to be right occasionally. When 20 years ago, I thought people that talked about fluoride in the water were wearing tinfoil hats. Well, it turns out that many of their concerns were absolutely dead on correct. During COVID, I mean, we saw a whole host of this type of stuff, on all sorts of different treatment options that were available. The one that was particularly interesting to me was vitamin D. I heard about some different trials that were going on over in Spain that dealt with vitamin D, and that kind of got my attention. So I started looking up vitamin D and its effect on respiratory viruses. Found a great lecture on that from a doctor who specialized in that particular area. Found a bunch of great lectures that were done from the University of Wisconsin on vitamin D and its history, etc. And it really got my attention. I had never knew that much about vitamin D until I started digging into it. And it's a very important quasi-hormone. It's not really a vitamin that turns out to be vital for respiratory health and a great way to help fight the disease and to make yourself stronger. So, I got my vitamin D level checked, started realizing I needed a supplement, started looking at ways of maximizing it, getting more sunlight, etc., as a way of helping to prevent a particular respiratory disease that was out there. And if I listened to the experts, they would have said, well, it has no effect. Yeah, okay, arguably. If you get hit with enough of a particular virus, and you may have an adequate vitamin D level, it may be possible that you may still end up with that particular disease. But what we found from a pilot trial, that yes, it was also possible that when you got large amounts of vitamin D, it prevented death. And no offense or buts about it, that's what that pilot trial really showed. But because it was a potential treatment, when they were pushing for a vaccine that couldn't have any treatments, they get an emergency use authorization, nobody did follow-ups on it. And, this is kind of the limits to what we've got to realize. I realize that there's conspiracy theorists out there that make a bunch of wild claims who say, look, if you just snap your fingers 3 times every single day, health, wealth, and prosperity are going to come your way. And that's nonsense. There's no mechanism of action. There's nothing that's remotely suggests that is true. But vitamin D, on the other hand, there is a mechanism of action. There's a protection against respiratory viruses that improves your immune system. There's a lot of reasons why you want to improve that level. With or without COVID, it's still there, and it's still, an issue, and it is still something that I pay attention to based on my own research. And, there's other influencers that have noticed that over the years, and they continue to push it. Same thing with a lot of vaccines. How much of a risk are you at? They tell you to take these particular shots, but are you at serious risk? I mean, with tetanus, frankly, your chances of getting hit by a meteor and dying are much higher than dying of tetanus, even though we just kind of automatically assume that they're safe, and they're not. They're not 100% safe. And the chances of actually getting that particular disease is pretty low. So is it really worth it? I don't know. I can't make medical recommendations, nor do I. But I can certainly take a look at these type of things for me and go, yeah, maybe I don't want to, maybe I do. Give you another example, beta blockers. I had a heart attack back in November. I had open heart surgery. My doc wants me to take beta blockers. Well, I don't like them for a number of reasons, one of which is I have bad reactions to them. They tend to make me lethargic. That makes it more difficult to get the heart started when I'm exercising, etc. There's downsides to it. Plus, there's a weight issue. One of the known side effects of taking a beta blocker is you're going to gain a few pounds. Bigger problem for me is I have not been able to lose some of the weight that I gained during that whole heart attack period and during the recovery. Okay, so I'm up a few pounds and I can't lose the weight that I had and can't get back down to my pre-heart attack weight while I'm on this beta blocker. That has downsides. Carrying around an extra 20 pounds is going to create wear and tear on joints, etc. Okay, so I'm looking at it going, okay, I see the downside. Now I got to have a talk with my doc about what's the upside with this thing. What things should I be looking for? I know, I'm pretty darn sure that this thing is causing an extra 20 pounds. What's my upside? And if I quit taking it, what things should I be looking for? And and that's where you're using a doctor as a trusted guide, not as a FOAC, a fountain of all wisdom and knowledge. See, docs see hundreds of patients. They're getting a whole host of different people with a whole host of different lifestyle and health concerns that may or may not be yours. I'm not a pre-type 2 diabetic. I've, live a very active lifestyle. I eat single whole ingredient foods. I'm pretty darn healthy, generally speaking. How much of this stuff do I need to have and why? And when you have the discussion with, here's the known side effects, here's the upsides, I can make an informed choice. And that's what doing your own research does. And I don't have to be a doctor. I can't prescribe things. I don't make diagnoses. But your doctor's not going to tell you about vitamin D. He's not going to tell you about sleep. He's not going to tell you really about exercise. He's not going to tell you much about diet because, frankly, they don't know that much about it. That's not what they teach them in medical school. They teach them about really acute issues, things that are presenting, and they teach them pharmaceutical approaches to solve those particular problems. Not through lifestyle, not through changing your environment that are going to make things better in the long run. And as a result, we've got a huge percentage of this population with chronic diseases that are not being cured, but the symptoms are being masked with pharmaceutical agents because that's what doctors know how to do. They don't know how to really treat the root causes of the diseases. They're not being reimbursed to take care of it. The government, frankly, does not have a fiduciary responsibility to fix you. Their job is to sell agricultural products. They are subject to corporate capture unfortunately, when it comes to getting drugs approved at the FDA. Pharmaceutical companies have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to maximize profit, not to get you healthy. So there's really nobody looking after you. And frankly, you've got to do your own research because nobody else is looking after you. In this fight for your health, you are all alone. But we can all be alone in this together. But it does take work, but it's not impossible. by any stretch of the imagination to be able to figure this out. And I think anybody with an average intelligence can really do some basic research on stuff. Now, I will give you this caveat. Asking an AI bot to look up something for you is not research. Google around a little bit and see how many funny stories there are with attorneys that have let AI write their briefs for them. And it turns out that AI will generate false laws and false case studies, etc., and put in bad citations. It happens enough that it shows up. It just showed up again in Israel, where AI made up laws that just flat out don't exist. Another case where an attorney utilized it, and it turns out that the AI generated different cases that didn't exist. So it will do the same thing with your health if you just rely on that alone, but it can begin it's not, so asking AI, Grok, or whatever to look up something is not research, but it helps fine tune it, and it helps with the process. When you're trying to use an influencer that you like, realize that they're also subject to capture. There was a recent thing where a bunch of influencers were caught shilling for Coca-Cola when Texas was trying to take that, quit using taxpayers' money to purchase Coca-Cola for people that were on SNAP benefits. They can be bought too. There's a lot of people that are trying to buy influencers to push their particular supplement. It happens, but frankly, you realize this. I mean, when you go get a car, when you go to buy a car, you just don't go to any random car dealership, tell them how much money you want and tell them you want a car, and I'm willing to pay whatever you say that I should pay, and I'll take whatever car you just give me. That's not how it works in the real world. You do your own research, you kind of fine-tune stuff, you realize that it's kind of a process. And the downside of that is, frankly, it's a process. It takes time to do your own work, but, that's the only way you can do it, to get the right car for you at the right price with the right features. And, you'll be probably pleasantly impressed with all the stuff that's available out there and at your price point, if you're willing to do that type of work. And you ask friends and family, and look at other people's experiences. All these things all kind of work together to help you formulate your own best opinion. But frankly, at the end of the day, you're it. You're the one who's going to make a decision, and the best research that you can do, despite what the Washington Post tells you not to do. They're telling you not to do your own research, and I'm just saying, hey, bunk. You need to, because everything in this whole planet is not lined up to get you healthy. The only person that can do that is you. It's all up to us as individuals. So do your own research, do so proudly, and hopefully you can get to be as healthy as you can, and be thankful that you live in an era when we have so much information available. You don't have to go to the library anymore. It's all available on your phone if you're willing to take a few minutes to Google it and look it up yourself. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple messages each week. If you like this message, please hit like and subscribe. Join this channel of other like-minded folks who are realizing more and more, in this fight for our health, we're all alone, though we can all be alone in this together. I'll talk to you soon.